In a letter sent to Governor Kathy Hochul in late February, a group of Upstate Assembly Democrats have identified a handful of proposals they say will provide both short-term and long-term relief to New Yorkers facing high energy bills, which have gone up this winter. And as of the end of 2025, more than 1 million households were at least 2 months behind on their utility bills. To discuss the policy responses, we're joined by two of those Upstate Assembly Democrats, the Hudson Valley's Didi Barrett and the Capital Region's John McDonald. Well, let's unpack the more immediate proposals, because obviously people are looking for relief in the short term. And the first thing that you identified in your letter to the governor is a pause on state utility taxes. And looking to the reporting of the great Marie French of Politico New York, she's documented that this is kind of a hard measure to quantify, noting that New York doesn't collect sales taxes for residential electricity and gas, but local governments do collect those taxes. And while New York does collect gross receipt taxes from utilities, this amount was about $250 million last year, suggesting it's kind of just a small percentage of what the overall utility bills are that New Yorkers are facing in any given year. So what taxes have you identified, and what sort of savings are you anticipating?
So we looked for this number, too, in preparing this letter. And let me just say at the outset, it was Assemblyman McDonald, but also Warner, Cashman, Kay, Lupardo, McMahon, Magnarelli, Bronson, Lunsford, Conrad, Sturpey, Kellis, Clark, Romero, Rivera, and Burke, as well as me and John. Mm-hmm. So we did that legwork, and from Tax and Finance, the only specific number we could get from them was $739 million in gross receipt taxes for 2025. And the PSC authorizes utilities to recoup a gross receipt tax from customers. It's a tax without calling it a tax.
Sure.
And then there's a sales tax on state sales tax on commodity prices of electricity, which is not line itemed out, but that is backed into the supply cost. And then commercial customers, like small businesses, pay 4% state sales tax. So that's kind of the universe of taxes that we looked at.
And to add on to what Didi's saying, although I did like the fact that she rattled off those names like there were 12 reindeers.
Yeah, I thought we were going to start singing the tune.
Santa Claus is coming.
Exactly.
Well, we'll see what happens about that. But, the other thing to think about, though, is that, the sales tax she's talking about in regards to the cost, the energy cost. Particularly when we're seeing huge spikes, when electricity was going from 11 cents a kilowatt to 91 cents a kilowatt, that's an 80-cent spread, of which we're collecting additional tax on. It's kind of funny. A couple of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, there was a problem with the gas tax. There was a significant excursion up. We capped it. And part of the thought is, can we find some way, and it may take some time, to put a cap when we have these spikes that the ratepayers aren't picking it up, because it's the state who benefits from it. It's kind of interesting, right? All the talk about the sales tax a couple of years ago, how much we gained, and it was rebate checks. I'd like to see an immediate cap on it, so that way people see a benefit.
That's a good example that you bring up, though, with regards to the gas tax holiday that we saw in New York, because one of the concerns about that was, taken as an individual, there was a concern that you weren't benefiting that much in terms of the gas tax holiday. But looking at that whole number, that costs a lot of money to the state. So if we're looking at something like a suspension of these taxes, how do you ensure that it has a meaningful impact on an individual and not just putting a hole in the state?
Well, actually, it's funny because we're going to talk about the long-term things. One of Didi's long-term bills that she's pushing, which she can speak better at than I can, kind of gets to the whole mystery of what the going on. I mean, that's part of the challenge. We just don't know. And we'd like to be able to have greater transparency into that process. I'm not accusing anybody of doing anything wrong. I think we've seen generations of well-intentioned ideas lead to this gobbledygook that we can't figure out.
But one of the real issues, though, is that there is this cash that's kind of held in escrow that goes back to NYSERDA, and from the Clean Energy Fund, from other there's $770 million that's collected, and it's just kind of sitting there, assumedly growing interest as well. And this is money wouldn't impact the affordability programs like Empower Plus, that kind of thing. It's just money that's sitting there. So it feels like at a moment like this, there's an opportunity to take something and send it back to people. Just deliver relief, which is what people desperately are asking for.
Well, how would you want to deliver that relief, whether it is the nearly $750 million that you just referenced to that's being held in escrow from some of these clean energy programs that utilities are sitting on, or like that tax revenue? How would you want to go about distributing that money?
Let me just add on one thing. What should not be discounted here is that there are strong federal headwinds slowing down a lot of projects that are arguably going to slow down progress on renewable energy for the next 2 or 3 years. And this is why we're kind of moving into some kind of a sacred territory. We don't want to impact the conservation programs that help people with their energy. But at the same token, you're asking, how would you like to see that? Personally, I'd like to see a nice credit right on the bill. I know.
But to who?
To the ratepayer.
But exactly. I'm saying what ratepayers?
All
because
of them. Everybody.
all of them, regardless of income, regardless of what
if
their
there's
bill
a credit,
is.
show it.
But why should someone who can afford this bill, who, it's annoying, but it's not necessarily a problem for them to pay, get a break on their rates?
It's not a break. It's really putting money back into the ratepayers' pockets that probably shouldn't have gone to them in the first place, because there are all these other charges and other things that they're paying for. So it really, that's why these are short-term solutions in contrast to the longer-term solutions. We're looking for fixes to really deliver some kind of relief at this moment.
But the taxes are collected for certain purposes, so there's an expectation that they're going to be spent on something, and even this money in escrow is expected to be spent at some point. And there's also the RGGI dollars, which for people who aren't familiar is basically a charge on regional carbon from fossil fuel plants. This is money that has an expectation of being spent somewhere, so you are making a value judgment. It's better spent on this than something else.
You're talking about somewhere. We're focusing on someday, and we don't know when that day is. And I'm not being critical of the PSC or NYSERDA. We work very closely with them, but the reality is, as we've dug in deeper, and Didi and her team has done a great job of really pushing it, we're realizing there are projects that are probably not even obligated at this stage of the game, that may be 2-3 years away from now. Why are we collecting extra money when right now there's no need to use that?
Well, or there is a need to use it, and that is to deliver relief for all of these. I mean, we had a press conference today with the AARP, and I mean, their numbers are staggering, and that it's for older people, it's just 88%, 84% are seeing an increase in their bills. They're kind of panic. We have one of our colleagues who said they literally are keeping track of how many seniors call in tears about their utility bills. So it's a crisis in our communities, and we're looking. That's why we really, again, broke this up as short-term and long-term. This is money that's sitting there, and it could be, sort of mustered and shared, and then, back to hopefully a different dynamic, or looking then at the long-term.
Interesting enough, one argument to your point, to support your point, I think you're trying to make, could some of that money be used for arrears for utilities? We could try that. The problem is actually getting that message through, what it's truly benefiting, because there are people who are on the brink of having power shut off that would benefit from it. There's a mindset of some people that, you're just giving a break to people who are responsible to pay the bills. I'm not saying that, but that's what we hear from constituents quite often, and that makes it a little bit difficult. On the other hand, what most people don't recognize, and this is not anything by the legislature, but the PSC allows utilities for arrears that are not paid. Guess what? That goes into their next rate filing. And guess who pays for that? The people that you talk about that can probably, everybody pays for it, even the people who are low income, because it gets socialized. All the deficiencies in the past get socialized on future ratepayers.
I guess the concern
it's complicated, David. That's what I'm trying to get
I understand, but I guess the concern would be that we're talking about taking money that has eventual usages, so you're potentially leveraging these short-term gains at the expense of long-term cost savings. And also, we're not talking about a lot of money in the big picture of people's utility bills. I've seen a $6 billion utility bill for New York ratepayers, and if we're only going to find $1 billion. That means 16% savings. And if you're not going to target that to the people who need that help, if you're going to send it to Dave Lombardo, who, yeah, I can afford my energy bill. Great. Thank you. Please send me money. I'll always take it, but I don't need it.
Well, I would say, and I know that's different than what I had said earlier, we're happy to have a program that's distributed more on need or in some other way. We really just were looking for the sources, and that's why we sent this to the governor. It's not something that we're doing in the budget. We're looking for immediate relief now. So we're suggested for her, that was the whole point of this letter, here's some sources of funding, and you can figure out how to address where the needs are and get it out there.
Are you agnostic about where the money goes?
I agree with you. I'd rather it's go to people who need it, but we're really looking to deliver relief, and we're not hearing from absolutely everybody in our communities. Everybody's experiencing the increased rates, but some people are really struggling under that, and I think those are the people we want to see met first.
And are credits the easiest way to deliver that kind of immediate relief? Because we saw with something like the rebate checks, those took months to actually get out the door. Yeah. So credits probably the fastest way?
Credits, as long as they're properly audited, would probably be the easiest way, although, to be clear, when I've had constituents and I talk to them about their energy bills, they don't look at their energy bills. So we have to go through the process.
Jeez, I'm going to hit up those people for donations for the radio.
I know. I was like, because they don't understand the fact that the commodity is basically something by some energy company based in Texas or whatever it may be. They don't understand. And quite honestly, it's not their job to worry about that. It's our job to provide solutions, which we're trying to do.
What about the businesses that are obviously experiencing high energy costs?
Same thing.
Yeah. Do you envision this being something that they can access as well, or do you want to limit this to residential ratepayers?
No, I think the small businesses, the small not-for-profits, a lot of them are having the same experience.
And after a quick break, we'll continue our conversation about ways to provide short and long-term utility bill relief for New Yorkers with our guests, Assembly Energy Committee Chair Didi Barrett and Assemblymember John McDonald, who alongside about a dozen of their upstate Democratic colleagues wrote a letter to the governor in late February identifying ways to provide some relief. And when we get back, we'll talk about creating a centralized office, ensuring that New Yorkers are taking advantage of all of the energy bill assistance that is out there. And we'll also discuss whether it's time to roll back the state's Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act to avoid future increases to our energy bills. Support for the Capitol Press Room comes from O'Donnell & Associates, a public affairs firm providing strategic guidance to businesses and nonprofits on navigating policy and regulatory issues. More information is available at o'donnellsolutions.com. This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're continuing our conversation about short and long-term ideas to begin to address high energy bills for New Yorkers. And our guests are Assembly Energy Committee Chair Didi Barrett, a Hudson Valley Democrat, and Assemblymember John McDonald, a Capital Region Democrat, who were joined recently by about a dozen of their upstate Democratic colleagues pitching some ideas to Governor Kathy Hochul on how to address these costs. Well, let's turn to some of the long-term solutions that you've identified, and you've made the case for putting more of the excess revenue earned by utilities into the pockets of ratepayers. I guess for starters, why isn't more of that money going to ratepayers now, and how would the pending legislation that you guys reference in your letter go about addressing the approved return on equity changes that isn't happening in the current dynamic?
Well, it's a process, and we've worked with PULP, the Public Utility Law Project, on this, and they say that the earnings are $255 million in excess of earnings, and ratepayers only receiving about 14.2% of that. So all the excess of the utilities approved return on equity should be returned to the ratepayer via bill credits, and that's what our bill spells out. Mm-hmm. It's one way to address this, but the return on equity is definitely a place where there is money that's going back to the utilities, and it could go back to the ratepayers at this point. And
what sort of pushback are you expecting from the utilities on that front?
They don't love this bill, but I think they are coming to understand all of the the challenges, and I mean, they're also at the, end of this dynamic where their bills are not getting paid. That they're seeing a lot of people who are failing to pay, they're unable to pay, that, they're looking for programs to help them. So, I mean, I know they recognize that there's a huge problem. And while from the standpoint of their shareholders, they're not necessarily interested in getting any smaller amount of revenues than they have in the past, but I think they're understanding that we got to figure out a solution here.
If anything, that's good coming out of this situation is that everybody is coming to the table and offering solutions. The challenge is trying putting it together that's going to be meaningful to the ratepayers.
So another long-term solution you guys have identified is essentially creating an office to ensure that New Yorkers are all taking advantage of the myriad of programs that are out there. And it's been pretty well documented by some recent reporting that a lot of these programs are under-prescribed. My question, though, is if you get something like this up and running and it's doing a bang-up job of reaching out to everybody and everybody's signing up for what they're potentially eligible for, is there enough money invested into all of these programs to ensure that it could meet the increased demand, or are we going to have to triage some of these programs in the sense that there just won't be the resources because there's so much demand?
I don't think we know that yet because we've never been in that situation. And part of that is the fact that that there's a lot of people who aren't accessing it, as you said at the outset. That's not good. I mean, the fact that we have this money put aside, we have people with need, and they don't know that there's these resources that are available to them. So, I mean, I think that part of what we have to do is just start moving forward with making sure that people are as informed as possible. That, I hear what John's saying. They're not asking about utility bills. They're not paying attention, but they certainly know what it feels like. Mm-hmm. And that's what they're sharing with us. So I think our work is to create the Energy Affordability Fund that makes those resources available to them. And, this is something the AARP, they asked for like $250 million. We put in $500 million. So that, two different thoughts, ideas about the same thought, but that we, then they came on board and said, sure, if that's what you're looking for, we'll go with 500.
If the programs are oversubscribed, that's a good problem to have. I don't know if we're there yet at this stage of the game.
Although we typically are with something like HEAP.
Well, the interesting about HEAP is 50% of the people eligible aren't enrolled in the program.
And we still run out of money, though.
We still run out of money, but that's also a little bit of state, a little bit of federal, and that's not getting any better at the federal level. It's interesting, though, because, sure, we've gotten some complaints, and I always say to people in an email, I'll pick up and call them and say, so tell me what's going on. And we've been able to actually connect people to other programs like the EAP. That program is going to save people money. And you know what? If anything, if people complain and we find out there's a way to help them, that's a good thing, at least particularly during these difficult times.
There's just so many different programs, and they're under, the responsibility of different agencies. I found this when I chaired the Veterans Committee. It's like we have so many silos. People don't know how to break through that to get the resources that they need. And so this is a real opportunity to say, we're committed to energy equity, and this is what the state, and we put this under the Department of State, not the PSC, because I think we need a little bit more of a neutral ground, and they can include all these different programs.
And if we help people, that's a great thing. And just having a greater insight of what's going on, I think, is a very good thing. And once again, not casting dispersion on the other agencies, but as legislators and governors come and go, everyone has a new idea and a new program. And all of a sudden, you got all these programs, but there's really no center place to really kind of keep an idea and see how it's going. I think it's a smart bill that you put in, Didi.
Thank you. No,
I'll co-sponsor that.
Good. Thank you. We welcome you. No, I think it's an opportunity, and I think what John said about you have different administrations who have different priorities, and this is an opportunity to say New York State stands for supporting ratepayers and protecting people and making sure that if we have these programs that people can access them, and it's an opportunity to sort of do that in this front.
Well, sticking with long-term relief, do you think the state, as the governor has been making the case recently, should repeal all or some of the 2019 Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which the governor says is going to contribute to thousands of dollars in additional costs in the coming years?
So I think definitely first of all, we have to really see what's being proposed. Nothing's been proposed to us as of 3:30 at
We've
this stage of the
we've
game.
seen
We have not
nothing.
seen,
Other than the press asking about it, we've seen
I'll
nothing.
plead Sergeant Schultz from Hogan's Heroes. I've seen nothing.
Well, one proposal in the past that the governor floated out there and then abandoned was changing the methane calculations moving forward, making it more akin to what other cap and invest or cap and spend programs have identified. And my guess is that's what she's going to push again this time in order to scale back the state's cap and invest program.
How many other states have that provision?
It's a moving target.
I think it's 0.
With Washington.
Oh, maybe Washington.
Yeah.
And then they found out it was incredibly expensive. I think they may have.
Well,
how many other industrialized countries have it?
So given that past experience, are you guys open to the idea of changing the CLCPA
I think if we
law?
can do anything that's going to blunt the negative impact of adding more financial costs on families, we need to take a look at it.
And do you agree with the narrative that we're seeing from the governor that it would potentially increase costs?
I would like to just sort of shift the conversation to say,
I know,
what
but
we're here,
I just
but no,
wanna
it's
look at
about
it.
this. But
Sure.
what I'm saying, what I want to say is that I think what we're seeing is that a commitment to the goals, but not necessarily the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I think there's that, that if we're going to look at something, that makes more sense. I mean, we're hearing it every day about the electric school buses. We're hearing a lot of, other where the rubber meets the road in our communities. It's the timetable. It's not necessarily the goals.
Right. It's interesting. Well, you're going to support rolling back CLP. No one's talking about rolling back the CLCPA. Maybe we're going to be looking at a course adjustment. Maybe that's what we're looking at. The reality is, and I say this all the time to advocates, what's your goal? Well, no, we want to get this. I said, well, is that going to accomplish your goal? That's not what we care about. We want to make sure we get this. Well, the reality is advocacy is great, and I respect the people who come out and give 110%. Our job is to make sure that whatever the goal is can actually be implemented where no one is hurt.
So just to be clear, though, do we think the current timelines in the law and things like the methane emission calculations are going to drive up costs?
Well, this is the interesting thing about NYSERDA. Up until last week when that memo came out, any group that was supporting CLCPA were like dropping at any moment on what Doreen was going to say next because they believed so much in it. Now all of a sudden a memo comes out that they don't like, and it's like, stop the presses. This is ridiculous. So I think we deserve the right to get smarter on the issue and to see exactly what the governor is going to propose and have that discussion. I think it'll be vigorous.
Well, we've been speaking with the Assembly Energy Committee Chair, Didi Barrett. She's a Hudson Valley Democrat. Assemblymember, thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you, David. Happy to be here.
And we've also been hearing from her Capital Region colleague, Assemblymember John McDonald. Assemblymember, thank you so much.
David, it's always a pleasure.
Support for the Capitol Press Room is provided by New York State United Teachers, a statewide union of nearly 700,000 professionals in education and healthcare.